October 14, 2003. A silver sedan crosses the entrance booth at Grand Teton National Park at 9:05 a.m. The ranger on duty logs. The vehicle, Wyoming plate ending in 847, 4 occupants. Jenny Lake Trail listed as destination. The father leans out the window, asks about trail conditions. The ranger says the weather looks clear, but warns that temperatures drop fast after 4 p.m. The father nods, thanks him, pulls forward. The booth camera captures the mother in the passenger seat, holding a folded park map. In the back, 2 children, ages 9 and 12, press against the windows, pointing at the mountain peaks visible through morning haze. By 6:30 p.m., the vehicle has not returned. The park dispatcher calls the ranger station. No checkout record exists. A patrol vehicle drives the loop road twice and finds nothing. At 7:48 p.m., a county deputy reports locating the sedan, not inside the park, but 11 miles south on a gravel county road, engine cold, doors unlocked. The key sits in the ignition. The map from the booth footage lies on the dashboard, corners creased from repeated folding. A half-empty water bottle rests in the cup holder. The back seat holds 2 small backpacks. Inside one, a granola bar wrapper shows a convenience store receipt, time-stamped 8:12 a.m., same day, from a gas station 14 miles north of the park entrance. The family never reached Jenny Lake Trail. Search teams deploy at first light on October 15th. Helicopters sweep the area around the abandoned vehicle. Ground crews walk grid patterns through sagebrush and pine stands. A search dog picks up a scent near the car but loses it after 200 feet. The county road sees little traffic. Only 2 other vehicles passed through that day, according to a rancher who lives a quarter-mile west. He remembers the silver sedan. He says it was parked on the shoulder around noon. Hazard lights off, no one visible inside. He walked past it on his way to check fence lines. 3 days pass. No footprints. No clothing. No signs of struggle. On October 18th, the search expands to a 12-mile radius. Volunteers check trailheads, campgrounds, overlooks. A Forest Service employee finds a single child's sneaker near a creek bed, but the size does not match either child in the missing family. The father's employer confirms he requested the days off weeks in advance, submitted the paperwork on September 22nd. The mother's sister says they planned the trip as a surprise for the kids' first national park visit. She describes the father as cautious, always prepared. She mentions he grew up in Colorado, knew mountain weather, had hiked since he was a teenager. He was not reckless. By October 22nd, the active search scales back. The case file remains open, but resources shift to other incidents. 22 years later, a state lab technician named Ellison begins cataloging cold case evidence stored in a climate-controlled unit in Cheyenne. The Teton County case sits in a cardboard box labeled with the family's name and the date. Inside the park map, the key, photographs of the vehicle interior, a plastic bag containing the convenience store receipt. Ellison spreads the items on a metal table under fluorescent light. The map draws his attention. The folds are worn, edges frayed. He unfolds it slowly, smoothing the creases with gloved hands. On the lower right corner, faint pencil marks, numbers and a degree symbol. Ellison leans closer. The handwriting is small, deliberate, slightly uneven, as if written in motion or poor light. He transcribes it carefully. 43.6142 degrees. 110.889, 1 degrees, 12. He pulls up a mapping tool on his laptop. The coordinates do not match Jenny Lake Trail. They do not match the location where the vehicle was found. They point to a spot 8.7 miles northeast of the abandoned car, off-trail, outside the park boundary, in national forest land, with no maintained paths. Ellison checks the case file, flipping through incident reports and search logs. No mention of these coordinates, no record that anyone searched that area. He calls the Teton County Sheriff's Office. The deputy who answers remembers the case. He was a volunteer searcher in 2003, still in high school at the time. "I've got coordinates," Ellison says. On the park map, nobody checked them. The deputy goes quiet for 4 seconds. Read them to me. Ellison recites the numbers. He hears a keyboard clicking on the other end. That's 8 miles off-grid, the deputy says. His voice drops. We never went there. On a cold morning in late March 2025, 2 county deputies and a park ranger hike into the forest. The coordinates lead them to a ridgeline, thick with lodgepole pine. Visibility is roughly 80 feet in any direction due to dense tree cover. Snow covers the ground in uneven patches, deeper in shaded areas. They move slowly, scanning for any anomaly. At 10:17 a.m., the ranger stops. Ahead, a depression in the earth, subtle, overgrown, roughly 6 feet across. The snow in the depression is shallower than the surrounding area, as if something beneath disrupts normal accumulation patterns. They approach cautiously. The ranger kneels, brushes away pine needles and decomposed organic matter. Beneath, a section of rotted fabric. Dark blue, possibly a jacket. Got something, the ranger says. He pulls back more debris. Fabric. Blue. The deputies mark the perimeter with fluorescent tape. 1 radios for a forensic team. The ranger uses a small trowel to clear more material. A zipper appears, corroded but intact. Then a plastic buckle. Then, 5 inches deeper, the corner of a laminated card, partially buried in soil. He lifts it carefully. A driver's license. The photo is faded but recognizable. He reads the name aloud. 1 deputy closes his eyes for 3 seconds. That's him. The forensic team arrives by mid-afternoon. They work in silence, documenting each layer with photographs and measurements. Beneath the fabric, they find a small day pack, similar to the ones recovered from the vehicle but older, more degraded by exposure. Inside the pack, a flashlight with dead batteries and corroded contacts, a folded piece of notebook paper protected by a plastic sandwich bag, a set of car keys on a carabiner. The keys do not match the ones found in the sedan ignition. The notebook paper is damp despite the bag, ink smudged in places, but parts remain legible. It appears to be a list, trail names, mileage figures, a rough sketch of terrain features including a ridgeline, switchbacks, and what looks like a creek crossing. 1 phrase is underlined twice. Old survey route, no markers past MM4. A second deputy examines the sketch closely. It resembles a hand-drawn map, showing elevation changes and natural landmarks. At the bottom, another set of coordinates, different from the ones on the park map. These point to a location 1.2 miles further east. The deputy marks it on his GPS unit. The team continues excavating carefully. By dusk, they have uncovered remains consistent with 4 individuals in close proximity. Preliminary assessment suggests exposure and hypothermia as primary factors. No signs of trauma or struggle. The new coordinates lead to a second site. The following week, the team hikes to the eastern location through challenging terrain. The ground is steeper here, less forgiving, with loose rock and deadfall blocking natural paths. At 9:03 a.m., they find a small clearing surrounded by dense undergrowth. In the center, a fire ring, stones arranged in a deliberate circle, charred wood still present after more than 2 decades. Around the ring, scattered items, a melted plastic tarp, a broken aluminum tent pole, a single leather glove stiff with age. The glove is adult-sized, men's large. The forensic lead photographs everything before disturbing the scene, establishing a grid system. Beneath the tarp, they find a metal canteen. The cap is missing. The canteen is empty but shows no rust, stainless steel, well maintained before abandonment. On the base, an engraving done with a hand tool. A set of initials and a date, 1987. The initials do not match the father's name. The forensic lead photographs it, then holds it up to the light. These initials mean anything to you. 1 deputy inputs them into the database on his phone. A match appears. He reads the screen twice before speaking. Missing person. October 1994. He looks up. This guy never made it out either. The discovery shifts the investigation fundamentally. The family did not simply get lost. They followed a route someone else had taken, and that person had never returned either. Ellison revisits the evidence box at the lab. He finds a second item he had initially overlooked during the first cataloging pass, a small spiral-bound notebook tucked into a side pocket of one of the children's backpacks. The notebook contains pencil sketches, trees, mountains, a rough drawing of a trail sign with partial text visible. The handwriting is a child's, careful and deliberate. On the last page, an entry. Dad says we are going to find the old trail. Mom says we should turn back. I am cold. My sister is tired. The entry is undated, but the pencil pressure is uneven in places, suggesting it was written quickly or in poor light conditions. The final sentence trails off. A retired ranger named Kowalski hears about the case through a local news brief on a community radio station. He contacts the sheriff's office directly. He worked in the Teton area from 1989 to 2005, assigned primarily to backcountry patrol. I need to talk to someone about that family, he tells the dispatcher. The one from 2003. I know that area. They transfer him to the lead investigator. Kowalski describes the old survey routes, logging roads and fire access paths established in the 1960s and 70s, many abandoned after new highways were built and fire management strategies changed. One route ran northeast from the park boundary. Kowalski says. His voice is steady but careful. We decommissioned it in 1998. Erosion, rockslide, risk, pulled the markers. He pauses, but some people kept using it. Old maps still showed it. The investigator asks if he has documentation. I've got the original Forest Service map, Kowalski says. I kept it. Kowalski pulls out a faded Forest Service map from his personal collection, stored in a protective sleeve. He marks the old route with a yellow highlighter. It aligns almost perfectly with the coordinates found on the park map. The forensic team returns to the first site with ground-penetrating radar equipment. They expand the excavation perimeter. 6 feet west of the initial find, they uncover a second day pack, adult-sized, heavily degraded by 2 decades of exposure. Inside, a pair of binoculars with cracked lenses, a compass with a shattered face, and a folded topographic map sealed in a waterproof pouch. The map is dated 1972, printed by the U.S. Geological Survey. It shows the old survey route in significant detail, including hand-drawn notations in the margins written in blue ballpoint pen, warnings about washouts, rockslide zones, and seasonal creek flooding. One notation reads, "No safe descent after MM6 in wet conditions, alternate route required." The handwriting matches the style on the notebook paper found earlier in the smaller pack. A handwriting analyst compares samples under magnification. The analyst concludes with high confidence that the map annotations were made by the outdoorsman who disappeared in 1994. The father from 2003 likely acquired this map possibly through a second-hand store, a library sale, an estate auction, or inherited from someone who knew the area. The father used the old coordinates and route information, apparently unaware the trail had been decommissioned 5 years before his trip and was no longer considered safe or maintained by any agency. The timeline begins to clarify through cross-referencing evidence. On October 14, 2003, the family entered the park at 9:05 a.m., but changed plans shortly after. The father may have reviewed the old map during the drive and decided to explore the survey route, a deviation from the official Jenny Lake Trail that promised a more isolated, authentic wilderness experience. They drove south on the county road, parked on the shoulder near an unmarked access point, visible only to those who knew what to look for, and began hiking northeast. The terrain proved more difficult than the outdated map suggested. Erosion had altered paths. Fallen trees blocked old routes. By mid-afternoon, they were deeper into the forest than planned, relying on a map that no longer reflected ground conditions. Temperatures dropped as predicted. The father attempted to navigate back using the compass and map, but misjudged both distance and terrain difficulty in failing light. They reached the ridgeline clearing as darkness fell, and attempted to shelter using the tarp and whatever materials they could gather. Exposure set in overnight as temperatures fell below 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The coordinates penciled on the park map were a final attempt to mark their location, written in case they were found, or in case one of them made it out and needed to guide rescuers back. But the map remained in the vehicle, untouched. No one examined it closely until Ellison held it under laboratory light in 2025. Ellison examines the physical evidence one more time with fresh perspective. He notices a detail on the park map he had missed during initial review. In the top margin, a phone number written in blue ink, different pen, different hand from the pencil coordinates. The number has a 307 area code, local to Wyoming. He traces it through telecommunications archives. The number belonged to a now-defunct outdoor equipment rental shop in Jackson, Wyoming, which closed in 2006. Ellison contacts the former owner through a relative who still lives in the area. The owner, now in his 70s, remembers the shop clearly. "We sold used maps," the owner says over the phone. "Guidebooks, old Forest Service prints. People liked them." Ellison asks about a customer from late 2002 or early 2003. The owner is quiet for a moment. "I remember one guy bought a 72 topo map, asked if the trails were still good." His voice drops slightly. "I told him I didn't know. Told him those routes hadn't been updated in years." Another pause. "He bought it anyway." The father bought the map months before the trip. He planned the detour in advance, researching the route. The question remains. Why take the risk? A social worker assigned to notify next of kin interviews the mother's sister again in April 2025, now with specific questions about the family's state of mind in the months before the trip. The sister sits across from her at a small table, hands folded. "He talked about it all summer," the sister says quietly, wanting to show the kids something real. Not the boardwalks, not the visitor centers. She looks down. "He said he found an old map, places people didn't know about anymore." The social worker asks if she thought he would actually go. The sister shakes her head slowly. Her voice catches slightly. "I thought it was just talk, the kind of thing people say." She pauses. "I didn't think he'd take the kids." She also provides context about the father's personal situation. He had been under significant stress at work throughout 2003, long hours, pressure from management to relocate the family to Denver for a promotion he did not want. The sister describes him as someone who valued self-reliance, who believed that modern life had made people too dependent on technology. He wanted them to see what he remembered, she says. From when he was young, she looks up, eyes red. He just wanted to give them something real. But he miscalculated. The wilderness he remembered no longer existed in the same form. The final piece of the timeline comes from an unexpected source, archived wildlife monitoring data. In April 2025, a wildlife researcher reviewing old trail camera footage stored on mini DV tapes discovers a clip that was never flagged during the original investigation. The camera was positioned near the decommissioned trailhead, installed in September 2003 to monitor elk migration patterns through the area. The footage is dated October 14, 2003, timestamp 1:47 p.m. The resolution is poor, the image slightly washed out by midday sun filtering through trees, but 4 figures are visible moving uphill through sparse vegetation approximately 200 feet from the camera position. The clothing matches descriptions from the case file. One figure based on height and build, likely the father, carries a pack and pauses midway up the slope. He looks back toward the camera, though there is no indication he sees it. He appears to check something in his hand, possibly the map or compass. After 6 seconds, he continues upward. The group disappears into denser forest. The timestamp confirms they were on the old survey route within hours of leaving the park entrance, roughly 4 hours before the ranchers saw the empty vehicle on the county road. No further footage exists from that camera. The migration study concluded in November 2003, and the camera was removed. The case is officially closed. In May 2025, after all evidence is processed and analyzed, the remains are returned to the mother's sister for burial. A small memorial is placed near the park entrance, a simple bronze plaque mounted on a stone marker, positioned near the visitor center. The plaque bears the family's names and the dates of birth and disappearance. It does not mention the old survey route, the decommissioned trail, or the outdated map. It reads, "In memory of those who sought the wilderness and found peace." Ellison keeps a copy of the park map in his office, laminated now, pinned to a corkboard above his desk. He thinks about the father's decision often, how a desire to give his family something meaningful, something authentic, led them into terrain that no longer had the safety infrastructure it once possessed. One afternoon he stands at his desk, staring at the map for a long time. His own son is 9 years old, the same age as the younger child in the family. He imagines taking his son on a hike, trusting a map, believing the lines would keep them safe. He sits down and pulls the case file closer. How many other old maps are still out there? The archive facility in Cheyenne holds 1,247 unsolved cases in climate-controlled storage. Ellison has started checking each one systematically for maps, for coordinates, for any indication that someone followed information that was no longer current. In 3 months he finds 4 other cases with similar patterns: disappearances near decommissioned trails, old maps and vehicles, coordinates that point to areas never searched. He compiles a report and submits it to the State Cold Case Task Force. The outdoorsman from 1994 is still officially unaccounted for beyond the canteen. His case file contains a single photograph, stored in a protective sleeve, a man in his 50s standing at a trailhead, holding a wooden walking stick, smiling at the camera. The photo was taken by a friend 2 days before he disappeared, on October 9, 1994. The friend said in his statement that the outdoorsman was planning to explore an old fire access road he had heard about from a retired Forest Service employee. He wanted to see if it was still passable. He never specified which road. He told the friend he would be back by October 12. When he did not return, the friend waited an additional day before calling authorities, assuming he had simply extended his trip. The search in 1994 lasted 11 days. Crews found his vehicle on a different county road than the one where the family's car was discovered in 2003, roughly 6 miles west. Inside the vehicle, camping gear, food supplies for a week, a journal with entries describing previous hikes in the region. The last entry, dated October 9th, mentioned excitement about exploring a route that doesn't appear on any current maps. No coordinates were written. No map was found in the vehicle. The search covered a 15-mile radius, but never reached the ridgeline, where the canteen with his initials was discovered in 2025. His family declined to provide additional statements when contacted about the new findings. The sister of the man simply said through an attorney that they had made peace with his loss decades ago, and preferred not to revisit it. Kowalski, the retired ranger, keeps the highlighted Forest Service map on his kitchen table now, spread flat under a sheet of protective glass. He has expanded his research. Using archives from the Forest Service, the National Park Service, and county historical records, he maps out every decommissioned trail in the Teton region over the past 50 years. He counts 17 routes that were officially closed, but left physically accessible. No gates, no barriers, trailheads that look identical to maintained routes. Most have no warning signs. Some have faded markers that still indicate distances and destinations that are no longer accurate due to erosion, rock slides, or deliberate rerouting of safer paths. He writes a formal letter to the Park Service Regional Office suggesting a systematic survey and signage project to mark decommissioned trails. He includes his research, annotated maps, and incident summaries. He receives a response 6 weeks later thanking him for his input and explaining that budget constraints make such a project unfeasible in the near term. The letter suggests that hikers should always check current trail information at visitor centers before departing and consult updated maps available online. Kowalski frames the response letter and hangs it on the wall next to the kitchen table beside the map. A volunteer searcher from 2003, now a county deputy in his late 30s with 12 years on the force, visits the Ridgeline site in late summer 2025 during his off-duty hours. He hikes in alone, carrying water and a handheld GPS unit. He stands in the clearing where the fire ring was found. The elevation here is 7,400 feet. The nearest maintained trail is 3.2 miles southwest, a challenging full-day hike over difficult terrain for an experienced hiker. Cell service is non-existent. He checks his phone multiple times, sees no signal bars. He tries to imagine the family here 2 decades earlier, cold, disoriented, trying to stay together as darkness fell and temperatures dropped below freezing. He wonders if they knew how close they were to potential help, or how impossibly far in practical terms. On his way back down the ridge, following the path the forensic team had cleared and marked months earlier, he finds a small piece of fabric snagged on a low branch approximately 400 feet downslope from the clearing. The fabric is blue, faded almost to gray by sun and weather, consistent with the jacket material recovered from the primary site. He carefully removes it with gloved hands, places it in an evidence bag from his day pack, logs the GPS coordinates and time. He does not know if it means anything at this point in the investigation. He does not know if it adds value to a case already closed. But he takes it anyway, labels it properly, and files it at the station when he returns that evening. Because every detail is a thread in the larger fabric of what happened, and every thread leads somewhere, even if it only leads to more questions, even if it only confirms what is already known. He learned that lesson in 2003, walking grid patterns through sagebrush as a 17-year-old volunteer, hoping desperately to find something that would bring a family home. He learned it again in 2025, standing in a clearing that had held answers for 22 years while investigators searched everywhere else, following every lead except the faint pencil marks on a folded map sitting in an evidence box. The State Forensic Lab processes the fabric sample using updated DNA analysis techniques. Results confirm it matches materials recovered from the primary excavation site. The location where it was found suggests movement away from the clearing, possibly an attempt by one individual to descend toward the county road after the others had succumbed to exposure. The attempt covered roughly 400 feet of elevation loss before stopping. The forensic team's supplemental report notes that the terrain in that direction becomes effectively impassable within another 600 feet due to a steep drop of approximately 80 feet and dense deadfall from a decades-old windstorm. Someone tried to find a way out through the darkness. The forest did not allow it. In June 2025, a journalist writing a feature article on cold cases and forensic breakthroughs interviews Ellison at the state lab facility. The journalist asks what he thinks about when he looks at the evidence now, months after the case closed. Ellison considers the question for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. He says he thinks about the fundamental difference between a map and the territory it represents. A map is a snapshot, he explains, frozen at the moment of its creation and printing. The territory keeps changing constantly. Trails erode, trees fall across paths, rivers shift course seasonally. Infrastructure is removed or relocated. Hazards emerge. A map from 1972 shows a world that functionally no longer exists in 2003, and the person holding that map in 2003 has no reliable way to know what has changed unless they actively verify, unless they check with current authorities, unless they ask someone who knows the present conditions. The journalist asks directly if Ellison blames the father for the outcome. Ellison shakes his head slowly. He says blame is not a useful framework for understanding what happened. The father made a decision based on information he trusted and believed to be accurate. The information was incomplete and outdated. That is not malice or criminal negligence. It is a gap in knowledge, a failure of information transfer across time. The real question, Ellison says, is how society closes that gap for others going forward. How to ensure people understand that old maps can be actively dangerous, that routes change or close, that what was safe and accessible 50 years ago might be lethal now. How to make that knowledge widespread and accessible. The journalist publishes the article in a regional outdoor recreation magazine in July 2025. It includes a detailed sidebar listing resources for verifying current trail conditions. Forest Service websites organized by region, ranger station, contact information, visitor center locations, and recommended apps for downloading updated trail maps. The article is shared widely across social media platforms and in online forums focused on hiking, camping, and wilderness safety. Several commenters mention that they own vintage maps purchased at estate sales or inherited from relatives, and that they had not seriously considered the possibility that trail information might be dangerously outdated. One commenter describes finding a 1968 topographic map at a garage sale the previous summer and using it to plan an upcoming backpacking trip in the Colorado Rockies. The commenter thanks the article author and says they will verify all trail information with current Forest Service data before departing. The memorial plaque near the Grand Teton National Park entrance is visited occasionally by park visitors who notice it near the main pathway. People sometimes leave small stones on the base, a tradition borrowed from other memorial sites and cultural practices. In August 2025, someone leaves a vintage brass compass on the stone base, the needle still functional, the casing engraved with initials that do not match anyone involved in the case. No note accompanies it. Park staff photograph it for records and place it in the visitor center lost and found storage. After 90 days, no one claims it. The compass is eventually donated to a local historical society. Kowalski drives past the park entrance one clear morning in September 2025. He sees the memorial plaque from the road, pulls his truck into the small parking area, and walks over to it. He reads the inscription aloud quietly, traces the engraved letters with one weathered finger. He thinks about the 17 decommissioned trails he has documented, the ones that still exist physically but not officially, visible on the ground, but absent from current maps. He thinks about the outdoorsman from 1994, whose canteen marked a location no search team reached, and the family from 2003 who followed coordinates that pointed to places the world had forgotten to warn people about. He returns to his truck and drives directly to the Forest Service regional office in Jackson. He schedules an appointment with the trail management coordinator. He brings his annotated master map, his compiled research, and printed copies of incident reports spanning 3 decades. The meeting lasts 45 minutes. The coordinator listens carefully, takes notes, examines the documentation. She thanks him sincerely for his diligence and thoroughness. She explains again that budget limitations remain a significant obstacle to comprehensive signage projects. She suggests that public education campaigns and partnerships with outdoor recreation organizations might be the most feasible approach in the current fiscal environment. Kowalski thanks her for her time. He leaves the office, drives home, and updates his master map with additional notes from the discussion. He circles 9 specific locations where warning signs could be installed at relatively low cost. Old trailheads clearly visible from county roads, access points that still see occasional foot traffic from people using outdated information. He calculates estimated materials and labor costs. He writes a detailed proposal and submits it to 3 nonprofit organizations focused on wilderness safety and search and rescue support. 2 months later, one organization responds with cautious interest and a request for more detailed site assessments. The deputy who found the fabric on the ridge is assigned to another missing person case in October 2025, a day hiker, age 62, overdue by 18 hours in the Grand Teton National Forest. The man's vehicle is located at a marked trailhead. Inside, a trail map printed from a popular online mapping service. The deputy examines it closely under his flashlight. The map shows a loop trail configuration, 6.2 miles total distance, marked as moderate difficulty. The deputy radios the search coordinator and requests a pause. He uses his phone to access the current Forest Service trail database. According to official records, This specific trail was partially rerouted in 2019 due to documented bear activity and habitat protection measures. The new official route is 8.1 miles and rated as difficult due to increased elevation gain. The old route still exists on the ground, but is no longer marked or maintained. The deputy suggests a search team check the original trail configuration in addition to the current official route. The missing hiker is located 4 hours later, uninjured but disoriented, on a section of the old trail approximately 1.7 miles from where the reroute diverges. The hiker explains he followed his printed map exactly as shown. He had no idea the trail had been changed. He thought he was lost when the markers disappeared. The deputy files a comprehensive report recommending that popular online mapping services be contacted and encouraged to include prominent date of publication and last updated timestamps on all printable trail maps, with clear warnings that trail conditions and routes may have changed since publication. The report is forwarded through channels to the County Emergency Management Office and the State Outdoor Recreation Safety Board. 3 months later, the deputy receives a brief email acknowledgement stating that his recommendations have been noted and will be considered in future policy discussions. Ellison continues his systematic review of cold case evidence in the Cheyenne Archive facility. In November 2025, he encounters another case from 1987, a solo backpacker, male, age 34, last seen near the southern end of the Wind River Range. The case file includes a hand-drawn route map on lined notebook paper, showing a planned path between 2 prominent peaks with camping locations marked. Ellison compares the hand-drawn route to current USGS topographic maps and historical land management records. The route crosses directly through an area that was officially designated as protected wilderness in 1991, 4 years after the disappearance. No maintained trails were ever established in that specific zone. The backpacker was navigating through completely unmarked backcountry terrain using his own route-finding skills. The case remains unsolved. The backpacker's remains were never located. His family was notified of Ellison's evidence review but declined to pursue further investigation, stating through a family representative that they had reached closure decades ago. Ellison adds the 1987 case to his growing database of map-related disappearances. He now has detailed documentation of 11 separate incidents over a span of 4 decades, all involving outdated maps, decommissioned trails, or route information that no longer corresponded to ground reality at the time of disappearance. He compiles the data into a formal research report with statistical analysis and recommendations. He submits it to the state legislature's Public Safety Committee, with a request for funding to create a comprehensive public database of decommissioned trails and closed routes, fully searchable online by geographic region and closure date, accessible to anyone planning wilderness activities. The request is assigned to a subcommittee for preliminary review. Ellison receives an automated acknowledgement email. The mother's sister visits the Ridgeline site one final time in December 2025, accompanied by a victim advocate from the county sheriff's office and a close family friend. She stands in the clearing for 11 minutes without speaking, her breath visible in the cold air. She places a small arrangement of artificial flowers near the spot where the fire ring was documented and photographed. The flowers are secured with wire anchors to prevent them from being displaced by wind. She does not request to read the detailed forensic reports. She does not ask specific questions about the timeline or the physical evidence. She simply thanks the advocate quietly for helping her reach this place, then turns and begins the hike back down. The artificial flowers remain in place through the winter months, visible against the snow. And in a second-hand bookstore in downtown Jackson, Wyoming, on a cold afternoon in January 2026, a customer browses the outdoor recreation section near the back of the store. She finds a folded topographic map in a plastic protective sleeve, marked with a handwritten price tag of $3. The map is dated 1975 and shows trail networks in the Teton and Gros Ventre wilderness areas. She decides to purchase it, thinking it would make interesting wall art in her home office, a piece of local history, a conversation piece. At the register, The clerk mentions casually that old maps like this are popular for framing and decoration, but adds that they should definitely not be used for actual hiking or navigation since trails change constantly. The customer nods, says she understands completely, and tucks the map into her canvas shopping bag. The map leaves the store and goes home with her. And somewhere else, in another archive box, in another evidence facility, in another county, another case file, waits with another map, another set of faded pencil coordinates, marking another location that no search grid ever covered. Another family or solo adventurer or group of friends who trusted the lines drawn on paper and walked confidently into the widening gap between what the map promised and what the wilderness actually contained. The wilderness keeps no records of its changes. It does not file updates or send notifications. It simply continues, indifferent and patient, while the maps that attempt to describe it grow progressively more divorced from reality with each passing season, and people continue walking into that expanding gap year after year, carrying paper that shows a world that no longer exists, believing that ink and contour lines will keep them safe. The question has never been whether they should have known better. The question is how many more will follow the same fading lines before someone closes the gap between the map and the ground.